It's midday in Dakar and Conakry, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon, and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide at wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. First, the headline stories. Road transport operators in Senegal warns its members against traveling on roads leading to Mali. ECOWAS Court of Justice wraps up external session in Conakry to reinforce public trust.
The fact that the court has chosen to sit in Guinea this time is unprecedented.
A new human rights report praises the Gambia's democratic gains but warns of weak enforcement. And in Nigeria, stakeholders call for multi-sectoral collaboration to combat misinformation ahead of the 2027 general elections.
While the military secures the physical space, the media shapes the information space.
Please stay tuned for the details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Veronique Joy.
We are glad to have you join us. We begin with a security development here in Senegal as road transport operators have issued a warning to truck drivers to avoid road linking the country to Mali. This announcement followed a wave of attacks on Senegalese cargo trucks by suspected armed groups along the shared border. At least 11 trucks have been set on fire in recent weeks. These attacks have renewed concerns about the ongoing insecurity in the Sahel, especially in Mali, and its wider implications on neighboring countries such as Senegal. Francis Boniface has the details.
Transport unions in Senegal are warning that worsening insecurity in Mali could seriously disrupt trade and supply chains between the two neighboring countries following attacks on targeted cargo trucks traveling along the corridor. The Senegalese Truckers Union has advised Senegalese truck drivers to suspend travel to Mali following the repeated assaults on commercial convoys by suspected terrorists linked to JNIM. The union says at least 11 Senegalese trucks have been burned in several weeks, including after attacks near the town of Kati, close to Bamako. The Dakar-Bamako route serves as a lifeline for the movement of goods from the port of Dakar into landlocked Mali. Hundreds of trucks use the route every week to transport essential commodities. It is particularly important for Mali, which relies heavily on Senegal's port infrastructure for imports and regional trade. Prolonged disruption could affect the availability and cost of goods in Malian markets, especially as demand rises ahead of Tabaski celebrations. In Senegal, thousands of drivers, traders, and logistic workers depend on cross-border commerce between the two countries. However, transport operators say the escalating attacks have created fear among drivers, many of whom now see the journey as increasingly dangerous and unpredictable.
Francis Boniface with that report. Meanwhile, a new report on the state of human rights in the Gambia says the country has made notable democratic gains since the 2017 political transition. Freedom of expression, association, and the media have improved significantly compared to previous years, with citizens increasingly participating in public debate and accountability initiatives. The report by the Edward Francis Small Center for Rights and Justice, titled The State of Human Rights in the Gambia 2025, however, states that the country continues to face major challenges linked to corruption, weak law enforcement, and governance failures. It emphasizes that the Gambia's biggest challenge is no longer the absence of laws or institutions, but the lack of enforcement. From Banjul, St. Donald Mendy reports.
A new report warns that weak law enforcement, corruption and governance gaps are still slowing democratic progress despite gains since the country's 2017 political transition. It adds that corruption remains widespread, affecting public service, weakening institutions and eroding public trust in government. The report also raises concerns over access to healthcare, education and social protection. Madi Jobate, founder of the Edward Francis Small Center for Right and Justice and author of the report, says governance reforms are urgently needed.
It's as a result of the fact that public institutions and officials are not performing their functions as required by the law. So law enforcement is not merely protecting rights, preventing the violation of rights, but rights are also about the delivery of goods and services.
The document further highlights rising pressure on civil and political rights in 2025, including arbitrary arrest, excessive use of force by security forces, restrictions on protest, and selective application of the law against critics. A citizen, Lamin Sonko, shares his concerns.
Institutions like the police, the courthouse is doing better at some point, yes, because it's through them that we know that Oceano is free. It's through them that the gala strugglers and other individuals actually are home today. But this only happens when there is like pressure.
The report also criticized oversight institutions, including the National Assembly, for failing to ensure accountability, noting that audit findings and investigations often do not lead to sanctions. It further points to unresolved controversies, including the disposal of assets linked to former President Yahya Jammeh and the so-called Russian fuel scandal, where allegations raised in audits and parliamentary probes have yet to result in major prosecutions. For Newslink on East Africa Democracy Radio, Sangdana Mendy reporting from Banjul.
In Guinea, the ECOWAS Court of Justice has wrapped up its external session held in Conakry. For 2 days, the regional court examined several cases involving human rights violations, administrative disputes, and community-related legal matters. Beyond the hearing, the court also used the session to engage the legal community about the importance of respecting and fully implementing its rulings across member states. Sankule Janko has the rest of the details.
The ECOWAS Court of Justice, during its recent external session in Conakry, examined a total of 24 cases, mainly on alleged violations of fundamental human rights in several member states of the regional bloc. The court also reviewed cases concerning the failure of some member states to comply with its rulings. Frederick Foromo Loa, a Guinean lawyer and human rights advocate, says Guinea must now fully respect decisions issued by the regional legal institution.
The fact that the court has chosen to sit in Guinea this time is unprecedented. It will not only help raise awareness about the court's mandate, mission, and operations, but also encourage authorities to ensure the enforcement of its rulings at the sub-regional level. As human rights activists, we welcome this initiative and are satisfied because from now on, the authorities cannot claim ignorance of this court or fail to implement its decisions.
Civil society groups also say they will now closely monitor implementation of the court's rulings. According to Ibrahima Balaya Jallo, president of the Guinean Civic Forum, enforcement of these decisions is key to justice and accountability.
We hope the lessons have been well learned and that ECOWAS court decisions will now be followed through, because there are many cases in Guinea that have been brought before the ECOWAS court, especially those related to human rights violations. We therefore believe that political will must now be demonstrated, showing that Guinea is returning to democratic principles and respect for human rights.
The ECOWAS Court concluded its off-site session in Conakry with some cases awaiting final judgment, while others were adjourned for further review.
A report by WADR's Cherno Alpha Ibrahim Balde in Conakry, voiced by Sankule Janko.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Liberia, key managers of the nation's economy have responded to a new audit report from the General Auditing Commission revealing discrepancies in revenue collection and reconciliation systems between 2018 and 2025. The sum is estimated at over $257 million, along with large amounts in Liberian dollars. At a joint briefing in Monrovia, the Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank, and the Revenue Authority acknowledged the gaps identified but said reforms are already on the way to strengthen financial controls. WDR's Abraham Parker reports.
An audit of Liberia's revenue collection system uncovered major discrepancies involving more than $257 million and billions of Liberian dollars that could not immediately be reconciled across government and financial records. The review covered transactions between July 2018 and December 2024 and found significant differences between funds recorded in central bank accounts and the deposits reflected at the central bank. Finance Minister Augustin Gaffouan said an independent investigation was requested after inconsistencies emerged in the country's tax administration system.
We have reviewed and endorsed the audit's recommendations. We have briefed His Excellency the President to bring anyone found culpable over the 7-year period of this to bring them to justice.
Central Bank Governor Henry Samoa says new measures have now been introduced to strengthen oversight of revenue transfers from commercial banks into government accounts.
Everywhere the government revenue is being collected, we will make sure that revenue is recognized and goes into the general revenue account of the government of Liberia. So we will not have these delays.
Meanwhile, Liberia Revenue Authority Commissioner General James Dobojala blamed poor infrastructure and internet connectivity, especially in remote areas, for long-standing reconciliation challenges. However, critics argue the investigation may be politically motivated, as the report also covers the current administration. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Now, as political activities continue to intensify ahead of Nigeria's 2027 general elections, stakeholders are calling for stronger multi-sectoral collaboration. This particularly concerns the media, security agencies, and the public, with the sole objective of combating fake news and misinformation. The call was made during the 2026 Press Week of Nigeria Union of Journalists, NUJ, Abuja Bureau. WDR's Yechenusa Situ reports.
Ahead of the 2027 general elections, stakeholders in Nigeria are raising concerns over the growing spread of fake news and misinformation, warning that it could threaten national security, social cohesion, and democratic stability. Representing the Chief of Defense Staff, Director of Defense Information Samaila Uba called for stronger cooperation between journalists, security agencies, and the public to tackle disinformation and false narratives.
Considering the complex security and information environment we operate in today, the media remains a critical pillar of our democracy and a vital instrument for national cohesion, public enlightenment, and accountability. This partnership is not one of convenience, but of necessity. While the military secures the physical space, the media shapes the information space. Responsible journalism is necessary for national security.
Participants at the event also stressed the growing responsibility of journalists to verify information amid the rapid spread of online content and political propaganda. The forum further highlighted the need for ethical journalism, fact-checking, and greater public awareness as Nigeria prepares for another election cycle. For WADR, Yechenu Sasetu in Abuja.
Now to trade and commerce, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, Wamkele Mene, has described Africa's journey toward a fully integrated continental market. According to him, the process has been characterized by both significant progress and resistance from some stakeholders across the continent. He says while negotiations helped overcome concerns, some Africans remain hesitant about moving away from fragmented economic systems inherited from the colonial era. From Accra, Nadede Tete reports.
According to the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, Wamkele Mene, the continent's ambition of building a single market of 1.4 billion people depends on stronger coordination coordination in industrial, trade, aviation and competition policies. Speaking on Day 2 of Biashara Africa 2026 under the theme Harnessing Competition as a Catalyst for African Market Integration, Wamkele Mene said Africa's integration agenda required extensive negotiations to build confidence among stakeholders across the continent. He noted that although there was broad commitment to integration, some Africans expressed concerns about abandoning long-standing fragmented economic systems.
As a Pan-Africanist, I was surprised by the pushback and the resistance by some Africans. I was really surprised by the commitment of some Africans to fragmentation and the extent to which some among us desired to maintain that fragmentation and to maintain a colonial economic model.
Wamkele Mene said those concerns were eventually addressed through dialogue and assurances that the continental framework was intended to benefit all member states rather than disadvantage individual economies. According to him, the AFCFTA competition protocol is designed to create a common legal and policy framework that supports both large and small economies while protecting African commerce.
However, we did, of course, overcome that resistance by negotiating and providing comfort that we're not trying to take anybody else's job.
The AFCFTA Secretary General added that the protocol also provides mechanisms for cooperation between continental, regional and national authorities as Africa works towards deeper market integration. For WDR, Nadedi Tete, Accra.
You're listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and online at wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Road transport operators in Senegal warns its members against traveling on roads leading to Mali. ECOWAS Court of Justice wraps up external session in Conakry to reinforce public trust. A new human rights report praises the Gambia's democratic gains but warns of weak enforcement. In Nigeria, stakeholders call for multi-sectoral collaboration to combat misinformation ahead of the 2027 elections. Still ahead in the news, WHO convenes an emergency meeting as Ebola continues to spread. We also have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, limited access to quality education, rising unemployment, and a widening skills gap, especially among young people, remain major challenges in many African countries. As part of efforts to address the challenge, academic stakeholders from across sub-Saharan Africa and Europe are meeting in Dakar for the Erasmus Plus Regional Week 2026. The gathering is focused on skills development, academic cooperation, and strengthening educational partnerships between Africa and Europe. Stay with us for more analysis in the guest segment with Claire Herman, Director General for Education at the European Union Commission. And now talking health. On Tuesday, the World Health Organization, WHO, convened an emergency meeting of health experts following a fast-moving Ebola outbreak in parts of Central Africa. Delegates from several African countries and representatives of regional bodies and health institutions attended. The meeting comes after the WHO declared the recent outbreak in DRC a public health emergency of international concern. So far, over 100 people have died. Abdullah Hassan tells us more.
In response to the lessons the pandemic taught us,
the high-level technical meeting by the WHO on Tuesday should lay the foundation for future talks for many reasons. This is because the Bundibujo strain of the virus is deadly, spreads faster, and yet has no known immediate vaccine. But Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the WHO chief, says lessons learned from previous health emergencies, including COVID-19, suffice as mitigating measures.
Measures to strengthen surveillance and epidemic intelligence, to advance more equitable access to medical countermeasures, to strengthen national preparedness and emergency workforce capacities, to establish new financing mechanisms, and of course to deliver the historic pandemic agreement adopted last year.
However, these measures may be hindered in Africa due to the heavy intersection of poverty, conflict, displacement, and climate change, a web of crises Medicine Sans Frontières knows too well. Dr. Garon is the global coordinator at MSF.
Many outbreaks begin in remote areas and spread rapidly. We know this today. Effective response requires flexibility. Flexibilities in funds, flexibilities in approach, flexibility in operations, but flexibility on legal frameworks that will not impose unacceptable risk to those who can implement.
While WHO has already begun deploying additional health teams and tons of emergency equipment to affected areas, it warns that the situation remains highly uncertain and could worsen without stronger global preparedness and funding support. As of Tuesday, 118 people have died from the virus and hundreds of suspected cases have been reported in DRC, the epicenter, and Uganda.
Abdullah Hassan filed that report.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
For the newspaper review this afternoon, let's join Sang Donald Mendy in Banjul for major headlines in the country.
Let us begin with the Standard newspaper, which is reporting this morning that man gets a death sentence for killing his robbery victim. The Bundum High Court yesterday convicted and sentenced one Ousseynou Jallow to death on one count and life imprisonment on another for the killing and robbing of 62-year-old Binta Gassama during a violent robbery at her home in Fajara, South Atlantic in September 2022. Still with the Standard, the paper also reports that University of Education The Gambia unveils first ever degree programs, and in another major court development, the paper says prosecution witness to testify in camera in Sana Manjang's case. Moving away from the Standard, let us now turn to the Point newspaper, which is reporting that EFSTH justifies sharp increase in hospital consultation fee from $25 to $100 amid public concerns. The Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital has defended its decision to increase consultation fees from $25 to $200, saying the adjustment is necessary to improve service delivery and cope with rising operational costs. Also making headlines in the Point, G-Boss raises alarm over deepening employment crisis in the Gambia's formal sector. The Gambia Bureau of Statistics has warned that unemployment and limited job creation continue to worsen within the country's formal sector, particularly among young people. And finally, let us make our last stop at the Voice newspaper, which reports that Gambia man sentenced in Scotland to 16 years for fatal stabbing of wife. And in another developing story, activist opposes call to remove investigative article on Jame assets. And that wraps up today's press review from Banjul. Back to you in the studios.
That was Sang Donald Mendy with the press review.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
As stated earlier, education stakeholders from Africa and Europe are meeting in Dakar, Senegal for the Erasmus Plus Regional Week 2026. The gathering is focused on strengthening academic cooperation, expanding student mobility, and developing skills for the future workforce. Now, organizers say the Erasmus Plus program continues to play a key role in supporting partnerships between African and European institutions through higher education, vocational training, and international exchange opportunities. Claire Herman, Director General for Education at the European Union Commission, speaks to WDR.
Erasmus Plus program is a European program now open to cooperation with Sub-Saharan Africa. It benefits young people, but also their teachers and also organizations in higher education and also in vocational education and training. For young people themselves, they can benefit from mobility periods abroad in European countries. But for that, they have to go through their universities, which have bilateral agreements with European ones to organize their mobility. It's the same principle for staff of universities wanting to teach or be trained in Europe. In addition to that, without going through their own university, they can apply to the Erasmus Mundus scholarships, which are a little bit different. They are scholarships for master degrees, so a full master in Europe, while the usual Erasmus Plus credit mobility are more mobilities for shorter period in Europe, between 2 months and 12 months, to study in Europe and go back home to finish their degree.
I know that one of the things that was really emphasized is the fact that the curriculum needs a change, especially from a very theoretical perspective in Africa. How does the Erasmus Plus come in?
I think it's an issue in Africa, but also in Europe, that very often employers complain not to find the skills they would need to develop their business. And it's true that nowadays higher education often offers very theoretical knowledge. I think this remark is valid for many of the sectors. And we need, especially in Africa, very practically skilled people able to adapt quickly to the needs of the enterprises, both at higher education system, but also at vocational education systems. I visited a very nice project here in Dakar called Simplon, which trained young people on digital work, so abilities, skills. And with this very practical 9 months training, they were really able to answer the needs of the employers and small enterprises in Dakar, but I'm sure that it's valid also for other countries in the sub-region.
I did know you did mention that some employers find it difficult to get people that match their skills. However, I also know that the Erasmus has the Erasmus internship programs. Has this been tailored in Africa, and how would it help with employability of young Africans?
We have this mobility scheme, which is called International Credit Mobility, through which students can go abroad for learning at the university, but they can also combine and use this scheme to do a traineeship in an enterprise in Europe. And the opposite is also true. You can host in Dakar, for example, in Senegal, European students wanting to do a traineeship in an enterprise. So we also foster this kind of mobility, which beyond formal studies can improve the connection between the study time and the employment at university.
That was Claire Herman, Director General of Education at the European Commission. It's now time for sports, and in football, Arsenal have been crowned English Premier League champions after a 22-year wait. The Gunners secured the title on Tuesday after Manchester City were held to a 1-1 draw by Bournemouth, ending City's hopes of taking the race to the final day. For Arsenal, it marks their first league triumph in over 2 decades. And that's all for the sports news, and thank you for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio 94.9 FM in Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Maudiju for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. Coming up is a repeat broadcast of our gender program 50-50, and also join Sylvie Wedrago by 1 p.m. for the news in French. I am Veronique Njai. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Baft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio Pad in Damango and Royals FM in Wenchi. Thank you all for listening to Newslink.